Welcome to the Fresh Ice Podcast. Alongside my brother Brian, I'm Andy Matusi, and thank you for tuning in for our debut episode. Before we get things started, I'm going to pass it over to Brian.
Hi everybody. We're just gonna try this and give it a shot. We've talked about it in the past. We both are avid hockey fans and have wanted to try something for a long, long time, but really never got it off the ground until now. So we're gonna give it a go here, and we hope you have as much fun listening to it as we do recording it. So I think without putting on too much of a show here, let's jump right into it. A story that's a little bit older now as far as hockey news is concerned. But Connor Bedard was confirmed by coach Luke Richardson to be out 6 more weeks for the Blackhawks, which for a team that outside of Bedard really doesn't have a lot
Anything?
going its way this season. It's a little alarming, and it sucks for the fans, most importantly. With how tough last season was, losing the one bright spot kind of makes it feel like everything is how it was last season again. I just want to kind of get your thoughts on that, and how would you feel as a fan of Chicago right now?
Well, I personally can't speak to that because the last thing I am is a fan of Chicago. I will say, going back to the hit itself, looking at it, overall, it's a clean hit. He just, he
Yeah.
got caught in a bad situation.
Broken
But
jaw's a
overall,
pretty serious injury, though. A lot of guys will put on the cage or the bubble, but to not be able to play, that was a hell of an impact. But I do think you're right; it wasn't a dirty hit. I don't think Brendan Smith was trying to clean him up like that. It kind of reminded me of Connor McDavid's rookie year when he broke his clavicle after I think it was Brandon Manning on the Flyers slammed him into the end boards. But I don't think I really don't even think that hit was intentional either or dirty. It's just a really unfortunate play, and of course, it happened to be the team's best player in this case.
yeah, I just to kind of piggyback off of that, I second that. I don't see any malicious intent here at all. Like I said, through and through, it's a clean hit. He just bad timing on his end, kind of wrong place at the wrong time, got caught with his head down. Um, but that's a brutal blow for the Blackhawks. He was their silver lining. So I'm interested to see how the next 6 weeks play out for him after the break. I will say I foresee him coming back before that 6 weeks is up. I don't see any scenario where they play another more than 4 weeks without him.
It's tough to say because at the same time, you don't want to rush him back from an injury like that. McDavid was gone for months when he broke his clavicle. He came back and was instantly like the best player in the league again. Um, but I want two opinions from you on this. They're both about separate things. The first one is how this affects the rookie scoring race. So if you look at the rookie scoring race right now, Connor Bedard, is in the lead with 33 points. Right behind him in second and third are Brock Faber and Marco Rossi from the Minnesota Wild with 29 and 28 points respectively. When McDavid had his injury his rookie year, it seemed like he was the runaway favorite to win Rookie of the Year. And as a result of his injury, I believe it was Artemi Panarin that won it this year. Now, again, 6 weeks, and by the time he comes back, I think it'll be a total of like 8 weeks that he was injured. Is that a long enough period of time where if any of these guys below him, Fantilli, Luke Hughes, Logan Cooley, if any of these guys pass him, Rossi and Faber are included in this as well, with how well all of those guys have played, do you think that earns them the Rookie of the Year, or is Bedard so much better than them that he still could win it despite missing what'll come out to be like a quarter of the season?
It's hard to say. I say regardless of how long Bedard's out, I think end of the season rolls around, I think it's going to Bedard either way. And I think part of that is actually because and this is just my personal opinion. I think there's some sort of a small bias with everyone towards Connor Bedard.
I think so
Um,
too. Go ahead, finish your thought.
I was just gonna say, but with that being said, I still think he's an elite enough player that him missing this time due to this injury is not going to affect what he does the remainder of the season. I think he's still going to come out come out of the gates like he did
Oh
to
yeah,
start the season
I think
off.
he'll
So
come back and he'll be fine. I'm not worried about his ability, and thankfully this was, I mean, a facial injury. It wasn't a knee blowing out or a broken arm or anything like that. But just as far as this goes, I mean, we had the same conversation with McDavid almost 8-9 years ago now. That he should have probably still been the runaway favorite, but they gave the award to Panarin. When you look at the guys chasing Bedard in the race, the one that sticks out the most is Brock Faber, who is a defenseman but is second in rookie scoring. He's playing for Minnesota. He's averaging 25 minutes a night as a rookie, and he is one of the only bright spots on a Minnesota team that has had a lot of struggles this season. And for him to be this far up in the scoring race, he's playing on the top power play unit. He's playing on the top penalty kill. He's playing like a 32-year-old veteran, and he's 21 years old. If he passes Connor Bedard in the scoring race, I think there's a good case there for him to win Rookie of the Year, as well as any of these other guys, Rossi, Fantilli, Luke Hughes, Logan Cooley. They're all excellent players. But I definitely agree that there might be some sort of bias towards Bedard where, especially if he comes back early and continues to produce, I could still see him walking away with the Calder Trophy.
yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Another guy I've been trying to keep an eye on that I feel like hasn't, I don't want to say he hasn't lived up to his expectations, but he hasn't lived up to my expectations is Adam Fantilli. Number 2 draft pick. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't expecting him to be Connor Bedard, but I was expecting him to produce a little bit more than he has this year. But I think a lot of that also has to do with that he's playing on a Columbus team that is a small step above dog water at this point, especially if you look at last night's game where they blew a 4-1 lead to the Canucks in the third period.
I will say, oh, by the way, Fantilli was pick number 3.
I'm sorry.
But
I'll be
if you look at them side by side, Fantilli and Bedard still, I mean, Leo Carlson's, but he's pretty far down the list too for rookie scoring. He's 12. Excuse me. If you looked at this rookie scoring list for those two, Bedard is minus 22 in Chicago and Fantilli's minus 21. They're both really good players, but they're both on horrendously awful teams, and I think that kind of plays a big part of this. I mean, you mentioned he was a second pick. If you want to look at a second pick that at first didn't live up to expectations, look at Jack Eichel. That year where him and McDavid were 1 and 2 in the draft, I mean, he had an excellent year in college playing hockey, and he came into the league and was very good, but I think people were expecting him to be more on McDavid's level. Or I don't want to say McDavid's level, but a comparable player and an absolute superstar. And it took a while for him to get there, but I mean, look at him now. He just led the playoffs in scoring for Vegas and helped them win a Stanley Cup after being, by a large group of people, being considered like, okay, this guy's just going to be a run-of-the-mill player. He's going to be good, but not a Hall of Famer. I mean, he turned it around. To lead the league in scoring in the playoffs is no small feat, and you could argue he probably should have won the Conn Smythe Trophy for playoff MVP. So for Adam Fantilli, what that means is, yeah, he's not sticking out, and he's not maybe living up to some people's expectations, but the reality is he's scoring over half a point a game on a terrible team, and he's 4th in rookie scoring right now. I think he's on their top power play too, and for a team with few bright spots like Columbus, I think he's still got his head above water, and I don't think he's a liability by any means. And that minus 21 may stick out. But again, you look at Bedard, he's minus 22, and nobody's worried about, his defensive game this, or he can't score. So I think some time will do better for Adam Fantilli, and I mean, only time will tell, but I think the expectations do need to be lowered a little bit just because of how bad Columbus is right now and the mess that team is.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at what they've already gone through this year, hiring Mike Babcock in the offseason and then firing Mike Babcock in the offseason, although I guess they didn't really technically fire him. He kind of resigned, but and now I don't even want to talk about the schmuck they have coaching them right now. With the Blue Jackets at this point, I'm just like, let the players coach themselves. That's probably a better idea.
It does seem like the inmates are running the asylum there.
Yeah. They are 100%. And and Elvis wants out of Columbus, which I think speaks volumes. Yeah, as to the condition of the organization right now. So I think you and I went to a Blue Jackets game in Columbus earlier this year, and I think we got lucky with the performance we saw,
Yeah.
and it did help that they were playing Chicago. So
It did. I mean, it definitely makes a difference the quality of team you're playing. But real quick side note with Columbus, I think they're having a fire sale at the end of the year. I'm guessing
100%.
from management all the way down to the coaches, I think they're going to clean house because even though they're not a great team on paper, they are far better than they're playing, and they are certainly better than what I think third last in the league or fourth last in the league right now. I mean, they're not great, but they should be far better than this. And I would expect some wholesale changes there at the end of the year. I want to come back to Chicago real quick with the Bedard injury. There is a young man named Macklin Celebrini who is a Canadian junior player right now, and with the Hawks having the season they're having and Bedard being injured now, if you're a Blackhawks fan, do you want to see Bedard come back sooner and keep playing, or do you want them to tank really hard and see if they can land two superstars in back-to-back drafts?
I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. As a fan, you want to see. I mean, he's their best player. He is. You want your best player to come back as soon as possible and start playing. Especially someone who carries the team like he does. But on that note, the season for the Hawks, barring a miracle, is not going to see any significant improvement.
Correct.
And I'm not saying tank for draft picks, but at this point, that's the best route to go. I mean, you get the number one pick back-to-back years, you're gonna start cooking.
Yeah, and I know tanking is not super popular among a lot of NHL fans, but given the position they're in, I mean, what more can you do? You were already basically in last with Bedard. Without him, why would you just punt again and see if you can get lucky twice? I mean, they had great drafts with getting Taves and Kane, and I think if they land Bedard, or they have Bedard already, if they can get Celebrini, that could really go a long way for them. They already are building a good young core with some of their recent draft picks. I think especially if they can get Soderblom to really be their mainstay in that, if they can get him going and get some good defensive support in front of him, in 5 years from now, we could see them starting another dynasty. So I just wanted to touch on that to start because, I don't want to spend the whole show on Bedard, but that's a pretty significant injury to a guy who most people assumed was going to walk away with the Calder Trophy.
Right, and if I'm being 100% honest, I still think he's going to. I really, I don't think that this is going to phase him. I think he's still a sure shot.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on now, I want to talk real quick about this. Brendan Gallagher just came out 2 days ago, suspended 5 games for an illegal check to the head. If you saw the hit, as any level of fan of the sport, whether you're a die-hard fan or a casual fan or you've never watched a game of hockey in your life, everything about this hit was dirty and really didn't make sense to me. The timing in the game wasn't great to go out and make a stupid play. Just everything about it was messed up. I mean, it was so late and it was so very obviously intentional. A player like Gallagher, who's kind of an agitator anyways, I mean, he's a thorn in a lot of team sides. To go out and make a completely unnecessary play like that, I don't get it. I think the suspension could have been longer, or should have been longer rather, but given all the rules that there are with the collective bargaining agreement, and I think he's technically a first-time offender. So I think there's so many rules they have to abide by, but this really should have been a much longer suspension. I mean, he very obviously was, whether or not he was trying to hurt him, he was very obviously trying to make a late hit into the throw an elbow. None of it made sense to me.
I mean, you watch that replay of that hit. I mean, that has the potential to be a career-ending hit on somebody. I mean, it was absolutely brutal to watch. And I think he's lucky he walked away from it. As far as Brendan Gallagher is concerned, I mean, it's not something you see from Brendan Gallagher. He's not someone I consider to be a dirty player. Now, if someone came up to me and said Brad Marchand did that, as a Bruins fan, I can 100% say I would believe it.
Well, and that's not even his bread and butter. His bread and butter is more cheap shots, slew foots,
Footing, yeah.
yeah. That's kind of his thing, but that elbow was very reminiscent as far as the aggressive nature of it and the impact it could have had. It reminds me of the Cook elbow on Mark Savard. That was a now that one was a blindside hit. Savard never even knew it was coming. I mean,
Right.
this one wasn't as bad. That Cook Savard one is one of the all-time ones. I mean, that was brutal. But again, this could have had the same effect. I mean, Mark Savard played one more season of hockey after that, and after getting hit by, I think it was Matt Hunwick, the next year he was done forever.
Yeah.
He never came back. So I
would say
agree.
It wasn't even a full season.
Yeah. So I mean, you're right. The impact that this could have had. He's lucky that Gallagher's lucky that this didn't cause a more severe injury. I mean, that really. And he's lucky he's a first-time offender, too. I mean, any repeat offenders that throw that elbow are probably getting 20 games. I mean, that was brutal.
I would also like to point out, back to what you said about Brad Marchand, too, and his cheap shots. I would like to point out that he did elbow the absolute shit out of Marcus Johansson. And then the following season, which I believe 2019.
Yeah, then they were teammates.
Then they were teammates in the Stanley Cup final.
That's like after Marcus Foligno and Ryan Reeves fought, and then like 2 months later they were on the same team. It happens.
Yeah, that's best part of the game.
So, all right. So I didn't want to spend too much time with that, but I mean, I couldn't not address it. I don't think we had seen such an egregious hit like that in quite a while.
No.
Let's move on and talk about the Edmonton Oilers, who are, after their win against the Nashville Predators yesterday, one win away from tying the longest win streak in NHL history. Last night was their 16th win in a row, and when you look at the team and look at their star players, it's easy to see why this turnaround has happened. I mean, they started off so nightmarishly awful, but since then they've got the goalies going. Well, they got Stuart Skinner going and McDavid scoring a lot now, so it's easy to see how they've ended up where they're at with this win streak. It's just nuts to see. I mean, it's a historic streak to this point, so kind of hoping it stays up for them. But you look at McDavid right now, and let's check his splits here. So right now he is tied for fourth in league scoring. He's got 67 points, 20 goals, 47 assists. I mean, he looks fantastic. I mean, he's playing. He's night and day between October and November, and then all the way to now. He's like a completely different player. You look at, let's see, by the months here, for the months of October and November, total of 29 points. He had 9 points in October, 20 points in November, which was still over a point a game pace, but December, 19 points in 12 games, January, 19 points in 11 games. So he's tearing it up. He looks a lot more confident. Their power play looks good. They're rolling. And for Stuart Skinner, this is the real reason the Oilers have truly turned it around. Do you want to take a guess at what his save percentages were for the for the months of October and November?
I'm gonna say 936 and 932.
That would be more of now. He started off the season October in 4 games. He had an 863 save percentage and an 888 in November. They were so bad, which was most of the reason they were losing. Since then, in December, he was 6-2 with a 915 and save percentage in December, and then for January, a 9-0 record with a 953 save percentage. So,
my goodness,
as much as McDavid and Draisaitl and Hyman getting going for their scoring has helped them, they can almost always outscore their problems. Any goalie putting up a 950 save percentage, you can be the worst team in front of him. If you're getting that kind of save percentage, you're going to win every game.
Absolutely, and I that's been a big problem for Edmonton in years past. I mean, goal scoring hasn't necessarily been the issue. It's been dog water goaltending. I think that's a problem that you see with the Toronto Maple Leafs too, who are absolutely loaded and can't do anything.
That's a problem a lot of teams in this league have. There's a lot of teams in this league who are great on paper in front of their goalie, but the league average save percentage this year is like 904, which is, I believe, the lowest. I forgot where I was reading this. It might have been on ESPN. This is the lowest league average save percentage since the 2004-2005 lockout. So
Yikes.
I mean, it's horribly bad. It hasn't been this bad in 20 years. So, which makes sense because it does seem like there's a lot of high scoring affairs this year. I mean, we've already had a couple 10-goal games, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So
That
yeah,
Columbus game we went to was, what was that, 7-2?
yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
we're seeing a year where there's a lot of up and down goaltending, but for the Oilers here to come back to what I wanted to get to with them, I mean, this pace they're on is unreal. It's a testament also to how bad the Oilers season started because they've won 16 in a row and they are only the 10th overall team in the league as far as the standings are concerned, which is kind of mind blowing. But when you consider they won 2 out of like their first 10 or 11 games, or I think it might have even been more games than that. You can kind of see where everybody thought the wheels were falling off the wagon, but all of a sudden you get 950 goaltending, and surprise, surprise, you're top 10 in the league again. I just can't believe with 16 wins that they're not higher up.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be long if they keep up on this record or on this pace. It's got me kind of nervous going into the All-Star break, being a Bruins fan right now. Being at the top of the East, granted the Oilers are in the West, but come playoff time, God forbid that ends up being a Stanley Cup final matchup, man. That's not something I can bear to sit through. Had enough heartbreak in one lifetime.
That's fair. Well, and right now the playoff race is going to be insane, and we'll get to the top teams in the league at the end of this, because after the All-Star break, going down the stretch is going to be crazy. There are a lot of really good teams, and I think there's probably 5 or 6 teams that could really make a good run here, but we'll get to those later. I just wanted to touch, like I said, on the Oilers and this crazy run they're on. And coming out of the All-Star break, their next game is against Vegas. So if they're going to tie this record, it's not going to be a cheapie. They're going to have to beat a good team to do it. And then the game after that is against Anaheim. So if they can get past Vegas, they will have a chance to break the record against Anaheim. Definitely 2 games I think they can win, but that Vegas matchup will be a tough test, and it'll be fun to watch. So we'll move on here, and Andrew, I know you wanted to talk about Brian Hayes' appearance with Jay Henry on SportsCenter in Canada on TSN. The long and short of it is he's saying that based on this run the Penguins have had this year, it's really not gone their way. His spicy hot take is that the Penguins should get Sidney Crosby traded out so he has a chance to win one more cup. What are your thoughts?
Well, first thing I want to say is that is not a spicy hot take. It was stupid.
Yeah, that's
what
better. That was my nice way of saying it.
I'll take it a step further and say it was absolute brain diarrhea. He said, "Get Sidney Crosby out of Pittsburgh," as if they're holding him hostage there. Crosby has made no mention of having any sort of desire to leave Pittsburgh. I mean, the guy is top 10 player of all time. He's on my personal NHL Mount Rushmore. He's got 3 Stanley Cups to his name. It's not like the guy's won 1 cup or no cups, but he said Ovechkin is chasing Gretzky in Washington. Crosby should be chasing cups. For what? Every player wants to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
But Crosby has 3. Like I said, it's not like he hasn't won before. He's loyal to the organization he's spent his whole career with, and I promise you that's where he's going to retire. I don't see any scenario where he goes anywhere else. He's got nothing left to prove either. So and the other thing that he said that really set me off is where he started comparing him to Tom Brady, where he's like, well, look what Brady did. He left New England, went to Tampa Bay, and won another championship.
Oh,
yeah, well, he was already winning championships in New England. It's not like he was having a drought in New England and then left to go to Tampa Bay.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I want to touch on that, but keep going.
Yeah, it's just aggravating. His whole take was completely stupid nonsense, and I don't know. Just because somebody gets paid to give their opinion on things doesn't mean they're good at it.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And my thoughts after watching that clip were, I don't know if he was trying to make a name for himself. I personally, and maybe I'm just that uninformed, but I don't think I've ever heard of that guy before.
No,
I don't think I've ever heard of Brian Hayes before I watched this clip. Although after hearing it, I don't know that I ever should again.
Yeah. It was
there was a
rough.
lot of weird things about it, but a couple things stuck out to me were the first of all, like you said, they need to get him out of town. Well, why? They're not in, they're not in any danger of anything. I know they're up against the cap, but this season is starting to kind of look like a lost one. But why would you drive your captain out of town? He's already won 3 cups. He won back-to-back playoff MVPs. I mean, he's won the scoring title a couple of times. He's won the MVP a couple of times. He's led the league in goal scoring a couple of times. His accolades are endless. He's one of the few guys that's part of the Triple Gold Club. There's nothing in this sport he hasn't done, and he has nothing left to prove. He is one of the top 10, arguably top 5 players of all time. I mean, what good does it do? Yes, obviously, would it be cool if he won another cup? Absolutely, but he has nothing left to prove by doing so. I mean, if he wins another one with another team, it almost will feel kind of tainted. And you mentioned the thing with Tom Brady, and I'm glad you did, because I thought about that a lot after I watched the clip. Here's the thing with Tom Brady, and this is where it's comparing apples to oranges. First of all, it's 2 completely different sports, but
yes.
With Brady in the GOAT conversation, the big thing was, he's only been in New England, and he's a system quarterback, and it's only because Belichick's his coach. So he went down to Tampa Bay with the Buccaneers and won a Super Bowl his first year, kind of disproving that theory. But there's also a difference there, because the debate with Tom Brady is he the best of all time? There's not really a debate that Sid's the best of all time. I mean, there's some people that say he is, given the era he plays in and everything, but it's a little different. He's the best player of his era, without a doubt. He does not need to do anything else to prove it. His whole life is in Pittsburgh. He's the captain of the team. He's been there his whole career. There's no reason for him, unless he's that thirsty to win more Stanley Cups, which, I mean, I get it if he is, but if he's, I don't think he's so desperate to win another championship that he'll leave the team and the city that he loves. It would be stupid for the organization. It wouldn't really make sense on his behalf, because there's no guarantees. And since he's already won it 3 times, I just think that whole take was horrible. And it was just kind of a mess on so many levels. But ultimately, pretty much everything he said I disagree with, because Sid has just done so much for this league, for his team, for himself, that leaving to go to another team, even if he wins another championship, it almost wouldn't feel as rewarding as if he just closes out his career with one team and one team only.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, and we're both on the exact same page with this. I think I don't even know why they had this guy on. He's nobody. I wouldn't know him from me and you.
Yeah.
He's nobody. I've never heard of the guy, and then he comes on, and the first thing he says is something like that, just pure garbage.
Yeah.
And I'm not a professional sports analyst, but from what I saw, neither is he. And
in the last time the Penguins had a stretch like this where they were really bad, they hadn't won their back-to-back cups yet, and everyone's like, all right, is it time to move on from Malkin, Letang, and Crosby? And they fired their coach. They hired Mike Sullivan. I almost said Mike Johnson. That's the analyst for Sportsnet. And so they hired Mike Sullivan. They go win back-to-back Stanley Cups. Crosby wins Conn Smythe both of those years. And so that kind of erases that, okay, they need to ship these guys out because they can't win anymore. Well, they did. They won twice in a row. So now that you get to this point, again, they're struggling, 7 years later, but they're all in their mid to late 30s, and they've won 3 titles. Why ship any of them out? Let them finish their careers there. It is what it is.
Oh, I mean, you got those guys. They're literally the face of the organization. Why on earth would you ship them out?
And how much hell do you want to put your fans through? I mean, they drove Marc-Andre Fleury out of town. They couldn't get rid of him fast enough with the Vegas expansion, and look how well that worked for them. Matt Murray isn't even in the NHL really anymore. He's injured beyond being able to play. And Fleury, who should have probably been a Penguin for life, just moved into second all-time in wins with a team that's not the Penguins. I mean, that's pretty rough. So I mean, how much hell do you want to put your fans through driving all these, future Hall of Fame players out of town? It doesn't make sense. And again, I know I shouldn't put much stock into what Brian Hayes says, but to go on national TV in Canada and have such a god-awful take like that is kind of confusing to me. And And I almost wondered, did they just air it because it was such a bad take that they wanted the ratings? So, which is very possible.
That's the only thing I can think of because nothing about it makes any sense to me. From the fact that nobody's ever heard of this, I shouldn't say nobody's ever heard of this guy, but I've never heard of this guy. I follow hockey very closely, as do you. You've never heard of this guy. I think it was a ratings thing because that was by far one of the worst takes on any subject I've ever heard.
Yep. And speaking of bad things, let's talk about the LA Kings.
Oh man,
I don't know what the fuck this team is. Let's dive into the Kings because they started out the season on fire and everyone's like, oh man, they're getting good goaltending, they're scoring, they're Cup favorites, and now not so much. I mean, you look at the Kings and let's see here. Let's bring up their goaltending because it's really been the biggest problem here. Let's look at Cam Talbot, who's been their mainstay in net this season. For the month of January, Cam Talbot has played 8 games and lost all 8 of them. 0-6-2 with a 4.2 goals against average and an 873 save percentage. For the season, he has a 911 save percentage and a 259 goals against. So pretty good goalie, well above average for the season. But this past month, he's been terrible. And combine that with the more than lackluster play of Pierre-Luc Dubois, this team is really kind of spiraling out of control right now. They seemed like runaway favorites to win the division between them and Vancouver, and now they're just hanging on for dear life.
I don't want to say it's been nothing short of a disaster, but as the season progresses, that's what it starts to look like more and more. And I remember at the beginning of the season, I was like, well, they're going to be the talk of the league this year. They were just on fire to start the year. And now they're nothing. I mean, I shouldn't say they're nothing, but I haven't watched in LA. I watched their first 4 games this year. And
and they started the year 14-7-3, or Cam Talbot started the season 14-7-3 in net. And, you know, he was, I think he was like a 930 save percentage for a good chunk of this year, but he just fell off a cliff. And he's 36 years old. He's not, by sports means, he's not a young guy anymore. And the first thing to usually go with goalies is their reflexes and their athleticism. There's a couple exceptions to this rule with some of these guys in the league, but it kind of looks like he's just slowing down. And I don't know what was getting up his ass at the beginning of the year that he was playing so well, but it has clearly faded away in some capacity. And I don't watch enough of LA's games to know if it's the team in front of him, but to go from a 930 save percentage and drop to the next month to an 873 for the whole month, that's just awful. That's less than minor league quality goaltending.
Well, and my thing too is, you know, a lot of people will be quick to blame the defense, but you know, at some point, when does it become all right? It's not just the defense.
You need a save. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know your goalie's your last line of defense, but that's when he's supposed to step up. So I guess we'll just see what happens the rest of the season. I'm sure we'll touch on this again at some point. But maybe the All-Star break is what they need to get the train going again.
Yep, and who knows? And again, you're right. We could revisit this in June when LA wins the Stanley Cup and be like, wow, that was the dumbest shit I've ever said in my life. But when you look at it with what's in front of us now, it's pretty hard to imagine a scenario like that. I mean, you look at a team like Minnesota, who up front is largely the same team they were last year. But last year they were second in the league in goaltending behind Boston, and this year they are like 28th in the league in goaltending last time I looked. I mean, they've just been awful. They haven't been getting saves from Gustafsson and Fleury. The first month or so of their season was a nightmare before they fired Dean Evison. It's proof that goaltending makes all the difference. I mean, for a good chunk of last year, they were like one of the best home teams behind Boston. Everybody good last year was pretty much second to Boston. That was such a freak season. But I mean, they just have fallen off a cliff, and this LA team right now is a shorter term example of that. I mean, they have unstoppable goaltending, and they're winning games like crazy, and all of a sudden you can't get a save. Well, now you're going to stop winning these games. To lose all 8 starts in a month though for Cam Talbot, that's a rough look. So be interesting to revisit and see if LA picks it up after the break. I do hope for their sake that they get going, because they can be a fun team, and that's a fun building when that team's really good. So with those things covered this week, we just kind of wanted to keep it simple, go over a few things that jumped off the page at us. Next week's show, we're going to review all 32 teams, since we'll be coming out of the All-Star break. We'll get you guys set up for the stretch run for the last month and a half, 2 months of the season. So it's going to be a lot more in-depth than what we did this week, and we'd love to have you there with us. Before we go, Andrew, do you have any remarks?
Just want to say thank you to everybody that tuned in for our debut episode. We had a lot of fun making it, and we're looking forward to the rest of the run from here on out, and we hope you guys will join us for the rest of it. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you on that. This was a lot of fun doing this, and we're looking forward to doing it again. So we'd love to have you with us. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.